So good morning. And the webinar that we are in right now is for caring for the caregiver. And our speaker today is going to be Bob Scanlon. Bob was born and raised right here in New Mexico, and he attended college at Arizona State University, where he received his bachelor's in engineering and a master's in business administration. So Bob spent the first part of his career in engineering and finance before he gravitated over to healthcare. And in 2007, Bob took a job with Presbyterian as a manager at the Cancer Center at Presbyterian. He also worked as an admissions director with the Health South Rehab Health and held a physician's relations role with Humana. Bob is currently working as a grief counselor and caregiver advocate in the hospice setting. Bob's wife, Heather, was diagnosed in 2008 with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Her battle with cancer ended in 2014. Today, Bob and his two daughters are standing strong and are always looking for ways to give back to the cancer and oncology community. So Bob, thank you for joining us today. We'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I would like to start by letting you know that I have been doing this talk at this retreat for well over 10 years now, and I just truly enjoy doing it. And I have been to other sessions at the retreat, and I know what that's like. I know I think it might be a little bit different here when we do it virtually, which we did back in 2020, obviously. But whether it's on, your computer screen or you're in person, there's just so much information that you get through this event for 2.5 days. So I can appreciate that it's kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant and trying to get just a sip of water from just a gushing thing. And I'm not going to throw a bunch of that at you. I know you've, again, been through panels and different things yesterday. And so my style is much more just kind of storytelling and using quotes and pictures and movies and metaphors and that type of thing to make my point. So I'm going to just jump right in with a movie here that I love. This is the movie My Cousin Vinny, in case you don't recognize it. And these are the two main characters in that movie. Joe Pesci is Vinny, and Marissa Tomei her name is Mona Lisa Vito in this movie. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Marissa Tomei actually won an Academy Award for her role in this movie. And her Academy Award, the category was Best Supporting Actress. And I know that's a very important category and something that they do at the Academy Awards every year. And it's a very prestigious award. So just keep that in mind. This is a guy, I don't know if you recognize him or not, but here's his name. His name is Tenzing Norgay. And what he is he is a Sherpa. And a Sherpa is basically a guide for people who want to climb those huge mountains in the Himalayas and Mount Everest and things like that. And so I had a friend who was a mountain climber, and he climbed several of those mountains, including Mount Everest. And I've been to slideshows and presentations that he gave when he came back from his trips doing that. And one of the things he said was, there are people who choose not to use a Sherpa or a guide, and those people rarely make it to the top, or maybe even don't even come out alive sometimes. So he said the Sherpa is just an invaluable thing to have if you're going to go do something like climb Mount Everest. So again, another kind of supporting role there. And in sports, there's all kinds of supporting roles. Again, I normally ask people in my audience who these people are, but I'll just kind of let you know. This is a guy named Mariano Rivera, and Mariano Rivera was one of the New York Yankees. He retired a few years back, and his role with the Yankees and in baseball was what's known as a closer. So he's not the guy that comes in at the beginning of the game and throws a bunch of pitches and strikes out batters. He's the guy that comes in at the very end of the game, usually in the ninth inning, and just throws a few pitches. His job is to just get those last few batters out and end the game. And he was the best ever at that. This is a guy named John Stockton. John Stockton was a point guard in the NBA with the Utah Jazz for many years. And John Stockton, to this day, still holds the NBA record in a category called assists. And assists, if you don't know, is that event where a player doesn't score the basket, but he makes a play, a pass, something like that makes it easy for one of his teammates to score. And that's I love that. I love that category. I just love that assist category, and he was the best ever at doing that, at least up till now. And now there's example after example in sports, but the caddy in golf. Every time you watch a golf tournament on TV of the pros and the PGA, they all have a caddy, and that caddy's job is to do whatever they can to help the golfer that they're caddying for. Here's just a quick quote for you from Rosalind Carter, and she said, "There are three kinds of people in the world: those who are currently a caregiver, those who will be a caregiver, and those who will need a caregiver." And so all these things that I've just gone through, the movies and the Sherpa and the sports and everything, kind of is my opening to just say that supporting roles are hugely important. And to be in a supporting role is a very noble cause. And I hope that you know that, but I just want to reiterate that. People in supporting roles are behind the scenes and unsung heroes, and aren't always the ones. And in fact, I think it's rare that people in supporting roles get credit or full credit for what they do, but they certainly deserve it. And back in the 1960s and 70s, kind of that era, there was a guy named Andy Warhol. Maybe you've heard of him. Andy Warhol is famous for a number of things. He was a poet and an artist, but he's the guy that came up with a quote that said, "Everybody gets 15 minutes of fame." And I believe that's true. And one time I kind of put a pencil to this, and I figured out that if a person lives to be 76 years old, they will have lived for almost exactly 40 million minutes. And so my thought is that if 15 minutes of those 40 million are fame, then that means 39,999,985 minutes are something other than fame, which is supporting roles. So lest you think you're going to get out of here without being in some supporting role somewhere, it's unlikely. All right, so that's my opening. So here is kind of where we're headed today. I'll just kind of give you this as just a little agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about cancer and caregiving. Again, I told you I don't have a whole lot of statistics and facts and figures, things like that, but I do have just a couple in here. Roles and responsibilities of the caregiver. I'm going to talk about human connection, caring for the caregiver, which is the title of this talk, and then adversity. And you recognize this little image here, I hope, from The Wizard of Oz. This is as Dorothy starts out on her journey. So let's talk about cancer and caregiving. And again, I think most of you know this, but cancer at one time, and this is going back several decades, probably even back to maybe prior to World War II and that time frame. But cancer was when it was initially kind of identified as a disease that was among us, that it was a terminal disease. And as we've kind of come through the last few decades, and certainly up into here the 21st century, it has shifted from being what was once thought to be just a terminal disease to more of a chronic disease. And I know that's not true in all cases, but certainly a lot more than have been in the past. And we know this because we hear more words like manageable, treatable, perhaps even curable. These are all things that represent the advancements that we've had in cancer. And we also know that cancer survivorship is growing. The National Cancer Institute, the National Cancer Registry does a remarkable job of keeping all statistics on cancer, and survivorship is one of the things that they track. And we see survivorship growing not only in numbers, but in length and longevity as well. And so going back to those early days, cancer was at one point pretty much an inpatient disease, and it was treated in hospitals. And today, as many of you know, it is shifted to an outpatient treatment, where people go in and they get their chemotherapy, they sit in the recliner, they have an infusion, and then they go home that day. And same with radiation. Radiation happens a little more frequently as it's going on, but as you go in, you get the radiation treatments, then you go home again. So that's another change. And so here is the one statistic that I have for you that again relates to being a caregiver. And that is, today, spouses, families, and friends provide about 80% of the cancer care services that until recently were done in clinical settings by healthcare professionals. So that's really saying that with all these changes that I've identified here, it is really much more of a need for caregivers to be alongside of a cancer patient than has been in the past. So for all of you out there, God bless you for doing what you do as caregivers. All right. Cancer is a journey, and there's all sorts of milestones along the way in that journey: diagnosis and treatment. Under treatment, there's surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, rehabilitation. There's a post-treatment period, and then survivorship. And so when I do this talk live, I always ask my audience, where does the caregiving come in to this list of milestones? And the answer is pretty obvious. It's all of them, right? I mean, it's really important for the caregiver to be there all the way from the time of diagnosis to survivorship. And I have had opportunity to talk to people and counsel people as caregivers. And from time to time, I'll come across someone who says, well, I used to be a caregiver, but I'm no longer a caregiver because the person I was caring for is in remission, or they're just in a better place today, and they're in the survivorship category. And I try to gently correct them and let them know that, kind of once a caregiver, always a caregiver. As long as you're still kind of alongside of that person, then I would encourage them to consider themselves a caregiver in that relationship, regardless of where they are in any of these parts of treatment or even in survivorship. So I hope you feel like that too. All right. So who is a caregiver? This is a little bit of definition here. Most often, the primary caregiver is a spouse, a partner, or an adult child. When family is not available, friends, neighbors, coworkers, others can fill that role, obviously. But here's the definition that I like, and it is: a caregiver is the person who helps the person with cancer without being paid to do so. All right, so here's another way to look at that. Doctors and nurses are paid to be good. Caregivers are good for nothing. That's a joke. That's why I have the little smiley face there. So don't send me an email on that. I just want to kind of make light of things here. All right. Who else is a caregiver? Caregivers really do come in all shapes and sizes. And I have a story here about this dog. This is a family dog that we had. We got this dog because we were on a family vacation, my wife and my two daughters, and we were driving. We were up in Washington State, and kind of, in a little rural area, and we needed to pull over and get some gas. And so I pulled into a gas station in some little town, and at this gas station were these couple of young boys, and they had a cardboard box full of puppies. And my two daughters got out of our car and went over and, petted and played with the puppies a little bit. And we didn't have a dog at that time. We had added a pet earlier, and we had to put him down for age and different things. But my daughters just fell in love with these puppies. And my daughters were probably, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 years old, about that age. And they started to say, hey, Dad, can we get a puppy? Can we get one of these puppies? And my wife, Heather, and I, we talked about it, and we said, I don't think so. And especially Heather, my wife, was going, I'm just not ready for a puppy right now. I know they chew things and they destroy things and they dig up things, and it's just a mess to clean up. And I'm just not ready to do that yet. And so we had some more discussion, and we ended up taking a vote. And the vote was 3-1. It was my 2 daughters and myself in favor of taking the dog, and my wife had the single vote against. So majority rules, and we got this puppy. And sure enough, in that first year or so of having a puppy, he did all the things that my wife said that he was going to do, and dig up things and chew up things and make a mess and all that. But there were times when I was at work, and this is a little bit later on when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I was at work, my daughters were in school, and my wife was at home, and perhaps it was, a day or a few days after getting a chemo treatment or something like that. And she was resting comfortably, and this dog, the dog's name was Scout, and Scout stayed alongside of Heather. And so all that to say that while my wife had a kind of a love-hate relationship with Scout, the dog had a love relationship with Heather, and really became just kind of part of the caregiver team for my wife in those years. So that's my story about Scout. And I love this little bumper sticker: Lord, help me become the person my dog thinks I am. Dogs just have unconditional love, as you know. If anybody out there has dogs, you know that they are unconditionally loving, and I think that's a lesson we can learn from them. All right, so how does one become a caregiver? Well, it would be nice if this book existed. It doesn't. I actually photoshopped that word caregiving on there. So you can't just go out and buy a book or take a class or do those things. I mean, I think there's more and more resources and, literature and things you can do to become a caregiver, but, it's kind of a different process. So going back to the Wizard of Oz movie, this image here, becoming a caregiver is kind of a good news, bad news thing. So let's start with the bad news is that there really is no crystal ball or silver bullet. There's no textbook or field manual, those kinds of things to learn to become a caregiver. Maybe someday they will be, but as of right now, it's not anything that's standard across the board. But the good news is that you have what it takes. And I say that very generally and very broadly. And here's what I mean by that. If you continue with that same movie to the end of the movie, you remember when Dorothy and her friends finally get to see the wizard, and the wizard says exactly that. He says to the lion, hey, you don't need courage, you just need a medal. And he says to the scarecrow, you don't need a brain, you just need a diploma. The Tin Man, he didn't need a heart, he just needed a testimonial. And even as it turns out, Dorothy had everything she needed as well. She had what it took to get home. She just needed to click her heels together and say there's no place like home. So here's what I believe is what it takes to be a caregiver, and that is that you love the person you're caring for, and the person you're caring for loves you. And everything else in becoming a caregiver is on-the-job training. And for those of you out here listening to this, I'm sure you know that. That's kind of how we all learn to be a caregiver for the most part. All right. Roles and responsibility. And keep in mind, everything I have here is pertaining to being a caregiver for a cancer patient. So I'm going to tell you another little story here about roles and responsibilities. When my daughters were young, about this age in this picture, they started playing soccer, as many young kids do these days. And when you're this age, it's not even so much about the soccer or the game, or certainly not so much about winning, as it is about just learning to be on a team with other kids. And, for the kids, I think it's more about the orange slices and snow cones at the end of the game than it is about playing soccer. But anyway, it's fun at this age. And as they get older, those other things do become a little bit more important, right? As they kind of get up into their, teens and maybe into high school and things like that. Um, so we had a year of soccer where my younger daughter was on the same team with the same girls for a number of years. And one year it just got a little bit edgy for some reason. Everybody was just kind of, little, and the girls were a little older at this time. They were maybe 11 or 12 years old. And some of the parents really thought that we should be winning more games. And there was, yelling going on and people yelling at refs and telling the coach what to do and all kinds of things. And it ended up being probably the least fun year that we had with that particular team. And I remember at the end of the year, we all came together at the little banquet where you give out awards and things like that. And the coach gave a little talk, and he talked about roles. And he said, in soccer, there are four roles. There's players, there's coaches, there's referees, and there's parents. And he said, we all need to recognize those roles and recognize where we are in those roles and stay in those roles. And he said, this past year, we didn't do that. He said the players thought they were coaches and the parents thought they were referees. And it just got to be kind of messy, and we didn't have as much fun, and we didn't win as many games. And as it turned out, he was right. We went into the next year. He kind of reminded us of that at the beginning of the next year, and everybody did a better job of knowing their role and staying in their role. And it was a much better year, and everybody had fun. And I'm sure we won more games that year. But so that's just kind of a metaphor for roles in other places in our lives. And cancer and caregiving is certainly one of those places. And so there are different roles. There are patients, the people with cancer. There's doctors and nurses. There's caregivers, family and friends, support groups, and I'm sure that list goes on and on. But I've seen places where the caregivers or even maybe the patients think they're the doctor, and then or support and all kinds of things, and it does kind of get out of whack a little bit. So I just kind of like to share that and say that if you're a caregiver, to recognize that you're a caregiver, and to know what that role is, and to try to stay within that role and let the other people in the other roles do what they do as well, and things will go a little bit better, I believe. So roles and responsibilities. Here's just kind of a short list of responsibilities. I'm sure this list also could go on and on, but the caregiver has a ton of responsibilities. First and foremost, to be an advocate for the patient they're caring for, to be dedicated, to be patient, be a good listener. I always ask people when I'm doing this live if they believe they're a good listener, and usually about half of the people in the room will raise their hand. And statistically, in the United States anyway, I think our population, we are generally not good listeners. But we're going to talk about that here a little bit. Problem solver, orchestrator, housekeeper. Some of these may not be your normal role or responsibility. And maybe it's the person who you're caring for. The person with cancer might be doing some of these things in other parts of their life, leading up to today. But we have to do what we can to take on some additional responsibilities. And again, I think a lot of you know that. This last word on this list is empathy, or being empathetic. And I assume a lot of people know what that means, but I want to drill down on that a little bit here and just talk about empathy, because I really believe that empathy is hugely important in being a caregiver for a cancer patient. And in fact, I think empathy is the key to so many relationships and so many things that we have in life. And so here's actually the definition, the dictionary definition of empathy. Empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, and sensitive to the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of another person. I'm going to read that again. The action of understanding, being aware of, and sensitive to the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of another. Even if empathy comes pretty natural for you or for some people, it's not easy. It's not always easy because we're not the cancer patient. We don't have. I didn't have cancer. I don't have cancer when I was caring for my wife. So I had to do my best to really try to think about and feel where she was and what she was going through, and try to just do my best with that knowledge. And I'm going to back up here a minute, but if you're empathetic, I think it makes all these other things easier. I just using listening that I mentioned a minute ago as an example. If you have empathy and you're empathetic, you will be a better listener. You'll be more patient. You'll be a better problem solver. All those things, all the responsibilities of being a caregiver come a little bit easier if empathy is part of the equation. And so I have a quote here about empathy. It's my favorite quote about empathy, and it goes like this: never criticize a person until you have walked a mile in their shoes. That way, when you do criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. That's another little joke. Jack Handy, Deep Thoughts. All right. Human connection. In my bio, I've been a lot of places in my career and done a number of different jobs. And one of the jobs I had, I actually got certified in personality profiles. And I think a lot of people out there have whether it's through your job or maybe a church or some other group you might have been involved in, a lot of people will go through these little exercises and maybe even take a little test, and you get categorized into these different places. And these are your personality profiles. And I use the 7 dwarves here just kind of as an example of this. But this is really, again, another invaluable concept that I learned and have used in my life and in my work and in other places that just really helped me. So when, the very basic part of all this is that we are all wired differently from birth. And some of that might be genetic, and some of that might be how we're raised, and who knows how those things come about. But our personality profile kind of becomes our natural language. And some people are hard drivers and they're very fast paced, and other people are kind of slow and steady, and some are analytical, some are very relational oriented. There's all these different things, and they all kind of come together in what makes up your personality profile. And this is all really important as we communicate and interact with other people, because while there may be other people out there that are wired similarly to us, there's mostly people are wired differently than us. And so we have to just by recognizing that, I think it helps us to be better communicators and have better interactions and more meaningful things. And again, please keep in mind that all of this is in the context of being a caregiver for a cancer patient, right? So I just want to point that out, that whether you as a caregiver and the patient you're caring for are wired similarly or differently, there's no rights and wrongs. There's no goods and bads. It just is what it is. We just need to recognize those things, and we can adjust a little bit. Now, I'm going to caveat that, and I am going a little deeper here on this because I have a little bit more time this morning. But if we're one of those people who's a fast-paced, kind of hard-driving person, and we're caring for someone who's maybe a little slower paced, a little more relational versus task-oriented, those kinds of things, it's really up to the caregiver in this relationship to adjust who they are, and to try to at least, if at the very minimal, recognize what the person you're caring for, kind of what their profile might be, and then the shortcut through all of this is to really kind of just be a chameleon. If the person you're caring for is a person who likes to talk a lot and is very, again, relational oriented, people kind of person, then maybe even if you're not that kind of person, maybe it makes sense to just try to be for the short term. You don't have to go through every minute of every day. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's healthy. I think it's important if you're a fast paced kind of a driver person to be in that place behaviorally as you go through your life. But like I said, we can adjust in the short run. And I think that's important for us to do. And so just to kind of illustrate this, I want you to look at the two guys on the far ends of this little spectrum of the seven dwarves here, grumpy and happy. And imagine for a moment that one of those two is a cancer patient and the other one is a caregiver, right? And so either way, it doesn't matter which way that goes. If one of those two is caring for the other, they're not going to be very much aligned in how their behaviors are and how they normally go through their days in terms of communication, primarily, and other interactions. But there is an opportunity to just kind of take a breath and step back and recognize that the person you're caring for might be different than you are, and to just adjust as you go. Because here's the other thing: to do that, to adjust your natural behavioral profile takes energy. It takes energy. If you're grumpy over there on the left, and that's how you kind of go through your day. And again, I'm not picking on grumpy or saying that people are grumpy, but just again, as an illustration here, for grumpy to be happy, he can do that, but it just takes energy. And if grumpy did that all day long and just kind of was happy and forced himself to be happy, he would be very spent at the end of the day. And so energy is important. Energy is certainly important in a caregiving cancer patient relationship. And cancer patients, particularly going through active treatment, chemotherapy, radiation, those kinds of things, energy is not in abundance at times along that. And so it's not the cancer patient that needs to adjust their personality profile or their behavioral profile. It's really up to the caregiver. So I hope that makes sense. I know you've probably had some other sessions on this retreat this weekend that talked about communication, and I hope this is just kind of an extension of that. But I wanted to talk about that and just kind of put it all in the context of being a caregiver for a cancer patient. All right. In that same vein, there is another thing to consider, and that is, and I think many of you might know what I'm getting at here with this slide. That there was a book written back in I think it was in the 80s, called "Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus," and it was written by a PhD in psychology or some behavioral scientist, and just really pointed out that men and women really are also wired differently, and if you remember, I had a slide at the very beginning here that said most often the primary caregiver is a spouse, a partner, or an adult child. And so I know this isn't, again, across the board always the case, but in many cases, it's a man caring for a woman or a woman caring for a man. And so just like we talked about with the personality profiles on the slide before, this is another place to just also recognize that men and women really do kind of see the world differently and approach things differently, and just the perspective. And this slide here, when I do this live in person with people, it always gets a chuckle. Many of you have probably already seen this or something like it, and I think people kind of chuckle at this because it's true. It's just kind of, again, pointing out that men and women have different perspectives on things. Here's another one talking about unspoken communication and how guys and girls kind of go through interactions and communicate with others who, may not be exactly like them. And so again, just to recognize that in particular in a cancer patient caregiver relationship, where it might be a male and female, I think that's just important to also keep that in mind and try to be empathetic about that as you go through your days and your interactions with the person you're caring for. All right, sorry, I had to take a sip of water there. Caring for the caregiver. This is actually the title of this talk, and this is important. I don't have a whole lot of slides here, but I do want to tell a quick story. When I was younger, kind of my last year or so of high school and my first few years in college, my summer job was a lifeguard, and um, I remember going through the training to become a lifeguard. It wasn't just a job you could, apply for and get paid for. You had to learn that. And I was a swimmer. I was a good swimmer, all those things. But what I really remember about the training that I had to go through to become a lifeguard was how many stories there were about lifeguards who swam out after to help a drowning person, only to have both the person drowning and the lifeguard end up drowning. And so they had just all these different examples of ways that lifeguards can help people in that situation without just swimming out and being kind of person to person with them. And if you see good lifeguards today, especially in public settings like on beaches or in public pools, things like that, most of them are carrying some kind of a flotation device. It might be a big tube of some kind. It might be who knows? It could be a ring buoy that they can throw out with a rope. But the idea here is that we want to, be careful and not. It's a travesty for someone to be drowning, but for the person to go out and save them, only for them both to drown, is even a much bigger travesty. So that we had to learn how to do that. And I think that applies to being a caregiver and caring for the caregiver, because when I first started doing this talk, it just really dawned on me that, yeah, there are people out there who are always offering to help. They are. And that's wonderful and that's beautiful. And I hope as a caregiver, you accept some of that help and take advantage of it and just let people help when they want to, because people do want to help. But at the end of the day, as a caregiver, it's really up to us to take care of ourselves. And we need to do that. And so just like the lifeguard who needs to recognize ways to help a drowning person without putting themselves in danger, I think that's really what we have to do as a caregiver as well. This is actually a line out of the American Red Cross training manual for lifeguards. It says, "A good lifeguard never gets wet," meaning they can, reach something out to a person or throw them something or do something like that. So that's the idea behind caring for a caregiver. And if you have been on a plane in the last 50, 70 years, there's always this little talk that the flight attendant gives is before you take off, and they talk about all the safety features on the plane and all those things. And one of the things they talk about is that in the event of an emergency, a little oxygen mask will drop down. And when that happens, they always say, and I'm sure this is part of just some kind of scripted FAA thing. They say, if you're traveling with someone who needs assistance, you put your own mask on first and then help the person you're traveling with. And that's along the same lines of what I just talked about with being a lifeguard, is that we have to, as caregivers, we have to put our own mask on first and then help the person. Meaning we just need to be at our best so that we can be the best caregiver for the patient that we can possibly be. All right. Adversity. I'm going to start here with a quote. This is an ancient Chinese proverb that says, "Calm waters do not make a skilled sailor." And I love that quote. I don't know exactly why, but I get a lot of comfort from that quote as I go through my life and I get to places in my life that are hard or tough or whatever they might be. And I know that we all are going to face that. We all are going to have adversity in our lives at some place or another, and most likely you already have. Certainly, if you're here, we're talking about cancer being part of your life or part of person you're caring for. Challenge, there's suffering. These are all things that come with just being alive, and so yeah, they're tough. But again, going back to that quote that calm waters do not make a skilled sailor, as we go through these things, so the adversity, challenge, suffering, whatever they may be, they lead to strength. We come through them and we get to the other side, and it's like getting a merit badge. It also leads to wisdom. We get knowledge, and we grow both physically and mentally and emotionally from those things. I would argue that it even leads to enlightenment and fulfillment in the long run. And I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody here. But the hard part about this is that when these things are going on, adversity, challenge, suffering, these things are really nowhere in sight. It's after we do what we need to do to get through this part, these things in our lives, that these things come afterwards. And so that's what it and that happens certainly in being a caregiver for a cancer patient and for the cancer patient themselves. So that's really all I have for today. Here's my email address. I invite anyone, if you want, to email me if you have questions, or if there's anything I can do for you or help point you in the direction of resources or anything like that. So I guess I'll open it up for questions or anything that you have.
Do you have a home healthcare service did you have a home healthcare service as you monitored your wife's care, Bob?
My wife, she was diagnosed and passed away 6 years later. She was on hospice, and we had assistance then. I don't know that we had any paid home health people at that time, just because I come from a big family. She came from a big family. We had just a ton of support, but I do know that that's an important role. And if that's something that is needed, I know there's a lot of great agencies out there and great people out there who are available to provide those services. So if it's kind of leads and names and numbers you're looking for there, I can help you with that if you want to email me, or I think the folks here at Cancer Services of New Mexico can also help with some resources there.
We can.
We just have comments. Just a comment. Thank you. Very helpful from Laura. And then we had someone that was anonymous that said you have a great sense of humor, which I agree. And it was very refreshing, which we're so thankful for you, Bob. You do a great job every time.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to do it, and just privileged to be part of this event and part of this organization. So thank you.